What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews, and in today's video, I'm going to share with you some of the bets that I've already locked down on this upcoming three-game slate. We're going to go through Daft's Deep Dive, which is where I take you through all the key players. We talk about their matchups, their form lines. I tell you what's good, I tell you what isn't, and I try to give you all the information you need before you place your bets. But before we jump into that, a quick recap from the last video. I shared 3 picks in that video. We went 2 and 1. Firstly, with the winners, one was Chet Holmgren for 10 points, 10 rebounds. That was a sweat and a half. He got his last rebound with like 30 seconds left, but it did cash. So thank you, Chet, for the sweat. My ass cheeks are still throbbing from having to clench so hard. We also took Clint Capella under his rebounds and assists, 9.5. I think he finished with 7 rebounds, 1 assist, something like that. But it hit. It was still a little bit sweaty because it is an under, and Clint Capella played a lot more minutes than I thought he would. But we still cashed on that. And the loser of the day, RJ Barrett. We needed over 11.5 rebounds and assists. I think he finished with 6. So sweat-free loss, you could say. But RJ Barrett was not in his rebounding and assisting bag today. It was a pretty poor pick, if I'm being honest with you. Now, think about it. I probably got overwhelmed with a whole lot of green that we've been saying recently. But what can you do? Slightly winning day on those if you tailed 2 and 1. And we got more bets to go through today. Now, if that sounds interesting, let's go. So we're jumping into Props Madness, and if you did not know, Props Madness has all the advanced data that you need to make your NBA predictions. It's the only tool on the market like it, if I'm being honest with you, and I've partnered with these guys for the foreseeable future. If you're interested in checking it out, 7-day free trial in the video description below. All the best cappers online are using this. Some of them might just not be telling you. So check it out, 7-day free trial. I am the only person on YouTube who can give you a discount, so sign up with the code DAFT if you sign up to Props Madness. Now, I've got 2 bets that I've already placed, and I've got a lean on a third, one from each game. So I'll take you through those real quick. Then we can get into Daft's Deep Dive and start to play around with Props Madness a little bit to find an edge. So the first game we're looking at here is the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are in a back-to-back. Zach LaVine, Pat Williams, Josh Giddey are game-time decisions. Zach LaVine probably the main one people are worried about, whereas the others look likely to play. Minnesota, full bill of health, no injuries whatsoever. If we think about the spread in this game, Chicago 8-point underdogs, total at 227.5. I've gone through all the players, and the one I ultimately landed on here was Rudy Gobert. Now, I don't like betting on Rudy Gobert, if I'm being honest with you, but there are some historical trends that I just can't ignore. So for Rudy Gobert, I'm looking to actually take him for a double-double, 10 points and 10 rebounds. So if you look at, I'll look at his points and his rebounds to explain it all to you. But to really sum it up and why we're going with Rudy Gobert here, historically, he's given Nikola Vucevic from the Chicago Bulls some problems. Now, of his last 10 games against Nikola Vucevic, he's had a double-double against him in 9 of those games. He's averaging 16 rebounds, 14 points per game in all of those games against Vucevic. So he's had some really big ones. The other pivot there could be his points plus rebounds. You could look at that as well. But I just went the 10-10 because how does Rudy possibly get over 22.5 points and rebounds without getting 10 boards, right? But then I look on his season. He's eclipsed that number 3 times this season. And in all 3 of those games, a ton of rebounds. We have 13 and 14 against the Lakers, 15 and 12 against the Raptors, 17 and 14 against the Nuggets. So I think 10 and 10 is probably the safer way to go. And you get plus money for it as well. So Rudy Gobert, a double-double. That's what I like. But let's talk about how he's been going this season and what's been happening, because he's covered this line in only 3 games. The 10-10. For the most part, he's averaging 20.4 points and rebounds. So it hasn't been great for him. But it comes down to matchups here for Rudy Gobert. The Lakers, soft as hell against centers. The Raptors, soft as hell against centers. And centers have been eating the Denver Nuggets alive. Most centers have struggled against Wemby and the Spurs. The Spurs, very good at defending in the paint. The Charlotte Hornets, despite lacking some size down low, they've been pretty good. Well, they've probably been just leaking points to other places. And the Sacramento Kings, they've done a pretty decent job as well. They're very clear on what they're going to allow, and it's not points in the paint. So if we use Props Madness, there are a couple of filters we can play with here. One reason why we like Rudy's points here, he scores 93% of his points right under the basket, and the Chicago Bulls, dead last in that category. Rudy Gobert also scores a lot of his points in the pick and roll, the Chicago Bulls dead last in defending the pick and roll. If we look at similar types of players, Daniel Gafford, Walker Kessler, Nikola Claxton, like he's from Serbia. Nicholas Claxton, Nick Claxton. Similar types of players. They've scored 33% more points than their season average when they play against the Chicago Bulls. So bigs have been feasting on them. So Rudy, I do like the opportunity to score some points here. And if we look at the pick and roll defense specifically, this is the easiest matchup Rudy has had all season. But other easy matchups Rudy's had against the pick and roll, the Lakers, which he went over on, the Raptors, which he went over on, and the Denver Nuggets, right? Whereas the other teams where he's gone under his points and rebound line all happen to be teams that defend the pick and roll man pretty well. The next filter to look through there is how teams defend the restricted area. So I did call out that he scores all of his points in the restricted area. The Bulls are dead last. And if you look at the teams he's played against, the Lakers, bottom 6 in restricted area defense, the Raptors, bottom 8, Denver Nuggets, bottom 7, right? The teams he's gone under against, the Sacramento Kings, they allow the second fewest points there. The Dallas Mavericks, top 14. The San Antonio Spurs, top 12, and the Charlotte Hornets. Now, that was an easy matchup for him when it comes to the restricted area, but it was a blowout win. Not much Rudy time required. And now he's up against the Chicago Bulls. Now, the only way I see this bet losing here is I think if the Minnesota Timberwolves absolutely blow them out early and Rudy doesn't play his full complement of minutes, that could make it a little bit dicey. But I think at the odds that you're getting and the matchup we're about to see and his historical data here against Vucevic, I think Rudy Gobert is a great play. 10-10 or the over in his points and rebounds, however you want to dice it, I think they're all good looks. Now, my second pick does come in this Utah Jazz versus the Bucks game, and Giannis and Lauri Markkanen, they're both game time decisions. So there's no markets available on anybody else. But I do have a play on Giannis, and this comes down to whether he plays or not. So wait on that news. If he does play, this is what I'm going to be running with. And despite his decent scoring numbers this season, his point lines are 30.5, which is really high. And his matchup is great. Don't get me wrong. Great matchup for him to score some points. 30.5 is a lot for me, especially if there's a chance that there's a blowout here with a minus 9-point spread. What I'm betting on is Giannis to go over his assist line of 6.5. Now, Giannis averaging 6.3 assists per game so far this season. He's covered this line in only 3 out of the 6 games. So there's no massive edge here. The line's where his average is, and he's hitting that at about 50%. Now, historical data tells me that Giannis is going to be an absolute beast passing the ball in this game, and a lot of that has to do with Walker Kessler. Now, in his last 3 games against the Utah Jazz with Walker Kessler in it, he's had 13, 11, 11 assists. So 3 straight games with 10-plus assists against them. The Jazz, not great defensively, but with Walker Kessler down there, Giannis does find himself in those situations where he does have to pass. He has to do some drop-offs in the baseline or kick it off to shooters. He averaged almost 20 potential assists in these matchups against the Jazz. Now, he hasn't been doing that this season. The most potential assists he's had is 15. Hasn't necessarily faced a matchup where he's been forced to pass that ball. When he's got down low against a lot of these teams, he's gone ahead and scored it. But I think Walker Kessler's size could deter Giannis a couple more times than normal, and he does happen to kick that ball out. So, I do like Giannis to get some assists. In terms of the advanced data, the only thing you could really call out here is assists allowed. The Jazz allow the second most assists in the league. That doesn't necessarily correlate with the previous games that Giannis has played. I'm not really using advanced data to make this selection. This is gut feel. This is historical numbers, which tell me this in the matchup. And the points, the total points line for the game is at 230. So a lot of points will be scored. It will be a lot of up and down action. Giannis is going to score a lot of points in this game if he does play, but I also think he's going to have a lot of success racking up the assists. If we just look at the shot chart here for the Utah Jazz, there's a lot of green everywhere, meaning they're not good at defense, full stop. Their best area of their defense is limiting points in the restricted area, which is still worse than average, but they're absolutely terrible everywhere else. So they're going to give up a lot of open threes. I think Giannis can find them. He can find your Brook Lopez's, your Dame Lillard's, your Bobby Portis's, whoever it is. Giannis going to be able to find them, and I do lean to his over in his assist prop today. I might even make a small play to him to get 10 assists. Who the hell knows? We'll see. We'll see where we land. But I do like Giannis to get some assists, obviously, if he does play. If you're someone who's looking to get away from prize picks, I encourage you guys to check out some of my partners: Chalkboard, Parlay Play, Rebet, Better, Boom, Dabble. Go ahead and check them out. Similar setup as prize picks. You got to do more than a two-man entry to play. These guys offer deposit matches, sign-up offers, free squares, the like. Dabble's the only one that's slightly different. They just give you $25 if you happen to sign up. You don't even have to deposit. So feel free to check those guys out. The links for that are in the video description. For anybody who does happen to use them, it goes a long way in helping me out. So I do thank you for that. Also, if you're looking to get some bets down on the NFL, being honest with you, I was going to create a video for it, but I happened to fall asleep on the lounge, wasted a little bit of time there. So all my picks on the NFL, they're going to go to my free winnable subscribers. So feel free to check that out. I'll leave the link for that in the video description as well. Let's get into the deep dive, baby. All right, it's time for Daft's Deep Dive. With only 3 games, we don't have to rush anything here. In past videos, I have tried to rush through things just to try to get it all in. Hopefully, we can keep this at a modest time frame. But let's talk about Zach LaVine firstly. Great scoring this season, averaging 22 points a game. He's lined at 18.5. He's covered this in 5 out of 6 games. Is a game time decision. Has missed a few games, but let's talk about his matchup for those who are interested. So Zach LaVine scores a lot of his points in transition. He likes to score from above the break as well. If we look at that matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves, somewhat difficult matchup. They're 15th in terms of transition defense, and they're top 6 in terms of points allowed above the break. Just so visually that you can see it. Here it is. The Minnesota Timberwolves give up a little bit of points in the paint. Very good at defending the perimeter, though, so it might be difficult for Zach LaVine here. Doesn't have the best matchup, but on volume and minutes, if he does play, it could be something that he goes over. And has he had similar matchups this season? Firstly, in terms of transition, no. This is the most difficult matchup he's had when it comes to transition points. And if we look at above the break 3 defense, he's had 3 difficult matchups. OKC was one of them. He scored 22 points. Orlando was another. He only scored 11. And Brooklyn was a somewhat difficult game, and he scored 21. Now, keeping in mind, I think he went under his points line against Brooklyn. It was a lot. I think it was higher than 21. So in these difficult matchups, Zach LaVine has not performed, although his line is at 18.5. I'd personally lean to the under, but not something I'm too excited about. Next, we've got Coby White. His point line's at 19. He's over this in 5 out of 8 games, averaging 19 per game. Coby White scores a lot of his points above the break, and he scores a lot as a spot-up shooter as well. Matchup against the Kings. I mean, I'm so tired. The Wolves is a tough one. The Wolves, top 4 in defending spot-up shooters, top 6 in above the break 3-point defense. So the matchup here for Coby White is not nice. In similar matchups this season, firstly, talking about spot-up shooters, he has had 3 difficult matchups for teams who defend the spot-up quite well, but he has gone over against Orlando, did go over against the Utah Jazz as well. In terms of above the break 3 defense, he's had that tough matchup against OKC, only scored 9. Tough matchup against the Magic, scoring 21. Went under against Dallas, and now he sees Minnesota. So personally, for Coby White, I'd lean to the under on that as well, based on the matchups. But again, I'm not overly excited about that. We've got Nikola Vucevic. I did bet his PRA in this last game. It wasn't, they were getting blown out, but they pulled the plug nice and early. They didn't even play their starters much in the second half. And the blowout wasn't huge, but I think knowing that they have a small chance of winning, and they had a back-to-back game coming into Minnesota, coach was very happy to pull them early. So prior to that, he had been killing it this season, going over this points line in every single game. So this is probably one that I'd naturally lean to the over in, but let's dive a little bit more into the matchup. Vucevic scores a lot of his points in the pick and roll, and he likes to score right under the basket. Right, Minnesota, 14th in pick and roll man defense. And when it comes to defending in the paint, not the best, if we're being honest with you. In terms of points in the paint, they are bottom 10. So Nikola Vucevic to go over his points prop, that's a lean for me. If I look at last season's data, he had 2 games against Minnesota, scored 24 points and 19 points in those games. Did play a lot of minutes in them, but these games are relatively competitive as well. So I don't mind that. Didn't rebound well in those games, and he had one out of 2 games where he covered his assist line. So if you're thinking about the PRA, it could be an interesting look. PRA, he had cash in every single game. But I think the best look here is for Nikola Vucevic. It's definitely a play that I'd lean to the over in. I might build a bitch ass parlay and put him down for 15 points. I don't mind that. But you know what? I am going to do a bitch ass parlay across all 3 games. We'll put those things together. I'll share that to my Winnable subscribers as well. So sign up to the free Winnable. The link for that is in the video description. But I do like Nikola Vucevic to score some points here because if Zach LaVine's not going to, and Kobe White's not going to, that's your 2 top scorers. That means Nikola Vucevic or Josh Giddey is going to have to step up here, I think. And Nikola Vucevic, more than capable of doing it. Rudy Gobert, a great help side defender. As a primary defender, he's a bit overrated. I don't want Rudy Gobert to catch some strays here, but yeah, I think Nikola Vucevic has shown in the past he can get it done, and I like him to score some points today. Josh Giddey, real quick. 14 points per game this season. His line's at 12.5, 14 as an average. In terms of matchup, he scores in a lot of pick and roll stuff in the restricted area. I'd never bet on Josh Giddey for points, but I have seen a popular play could be his assist numbers. His line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 3 straight games, 5 out of 8 this season. And the Wolves 13th in terms of assists allowed. So not a major matchup advantage. In terms of pace, though, the Wolves are playing a little bit slow. Bottom 10 in pace this season. So I'd be a bit hesitant there. We then have Anthony Edwards. Now, oh, gosh. This is a full gut feel, but let me explain it to you. His points line's at 26.5, and I'm leaning to the under, and I'm leaning pretty hard. If I wasn't so scared to bet unders, I would bet this under. But let's talk about it. He's averaging 27 points per game. 26.5 is the line. Now, the games he's gone over, the Lakers, the Kings, the Mavericks, and the Nuggets, right? I think all of these teams probably feature in the play-ins or the playoffs, right? Bigger teams, yada, yada, yada. The teams he's gone under against, the Raptors, the Spurs, and the Hornets. These teams aren't going to play in the playoffs. These teams aren't a difficult matchup for him. And I'm starting to get the feeling that he's applying himself more in these bigger games against better teams. Chicago Bulls, no one's getting up. No one's going to bed early the night before because they're playing the Chicago Bulls. I'll put it that way. That's just a gut feel. And that's how I perceive Anthony Edwards. Can be an absolute dog, but he's only a dog in these big games. This is not a big game for him. So naturally, that's one of my first thoughts. In terms of matchups, advanced data, it's all looking good here for Anthony Edwards. He scores in the pick and roll, and he scores from above the break threes. Now, the Chicago Bulls, bottom 5 in terms of defending the pick and roll this season. They were, I think, top 10 last season, but no Caruso. But they're terrible at defending the pick and roll. Anthony Edwards has an excellent matchup there. And in terms of above the break threes, they're pretty good at defending above the break threes, but they're terrible in the mid-range and giving points in the paint. So the matchup, Anthony Edwards scores so much from above the break, somewhat difficult if you're talking about shot zones, but I think Anthony Edwards should be able to score whenever he wants to in this game. I just question the desire and the will. This is also an 8-point spread. The Minnesota Timberwolves should get the win here, and I can foresee the Timberwolves getting a win where a lot of people score. Anthony Edwards might score 20. Randall might score 20. Rudy might get 15. Naz Reid might get 15. Donte DiVincenzo could get 15. I just feel like, given the pace of this game, high pace, it shouldn't be too difficult for the Timberwolves to get buckets. So I don't think they rely on Anthony Edwards, or I don't think Anthony Edwards takes it upon himself to carry them. Now, I could be completely wrong here, but that's just my vibes. And I might bet on vibes, to be honest, sometimes, but that's definitely the way that I'm going with Anthony Edwards. I do like his under, but it's got nothing to do with data. Next up, we've got Julius Randle. His points line's at 20.5. 21 points as an average this season, 4 out of his last 7 games. In terms of matchup, again, like most of these guys in Minnesota, he's got a great matchup. He can score however he likes. And the way that he does score his points does in a way suit this defense here against the Bulls. And if we think Anthony Edwards is not going to show up today, then a Julius Randle over could be on the cards. But if we look at his games, there's no strong correlation here now that I think about it. So, yeah, I got no look on Julius Randle. I was just going to start winging it, but there's nothing in this data that gives me any confidence to bet an over or an under. The matchup is great, but it's going to be great for everybody here. So let's talk about Naz Reid for a second. Naz Reid, spot-up shooter from scoring from above the break 3. His matchup is not necessarily ideal. Given the Bulls, pretty good at limiting. No, no, let me take that back. I'm not going to say they're good at defending spot up shooters. They're good at limiting spot up shooters because whoever drives the ball, they let them score. So I just want to call that out. Not a great defense, but yeah, what can you do? So Naz Reid could have a big game off the bench in terms of where he scores. Obviously, a lot of above the break stuff. Ball's not necessarily giving that up. So it's the mid-range monsters, and there's not many players in the league that necessarily suit that play style. The Bulls are going to get up and down though, so they'll give up a lot of assists. They'll just give up a lot of rebounds. They play with the highest pace in the game, so you might want to find a player who benefits from a whole lot of pace. And it could be someone like outside of Anthony Edwards. Could be someone off their bench. It could be a Jaden McDaniels, these young guys who can get up and down the court. Now, Jaden McDaniels' point line, 10.5. He's only averaging 8.5 this season. Now, it's pretty interesting to see that Anthony Edwards averaging 27.5 in a great matchup. His line's under. It's at 26.5. Julius Randle's line is also under his season average, I think. But we see Jaden McDaniels, he's averaging 8.5 points a game, and they've set the line to 11 here. Now, it's not like Jaden Daniels is the best matchup in the world either. He's a spot-up shooter who scores in the restricted area. He's only hit this line once out of 7 games, but they've set his line at 10.5. So, and this is what I mean, where I think a lot of the role players could potentially get a nice run here. Jaden McDaniels can definitely use some scoring, boost his confidence for the season. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, another player who could definitely do that. So, yeah, it's a bit of a tricky game here, and I feel like a lot of casuals will probably just bet on the Anthony Edwards overs, and I'm not saying that's the wrong bet to take. I'm just saying I don't think it's that straightforward. So I don't necessarily love that game, but those are my thoughts. For the Jazz, I'm just going to skip that because I don't even think Laurie's going to play, and we've kind of gone through Giannis already. The last game is the Portland Trailblazers versus the San Antonio Spurs. For the Portland Trailblazers, Shaedon Sharpe, he's a game time decision, but if he does play, he's going to be on a minutes restriction. The Spurs still missing Trey Jones, Sohan, and Devin Vassell. So let's talk about some dogs. We got Victor Wembanyama, and I did lean to his over in his points prop. It did open at 22.5. It's up to 23.5, so a lot of people seem to be betting it. Oof, it's 24.5 in some places. I can't trust Victor Wembanyama at this point in the season based on what I've seen, but I do expect him to bounce back because he does typically bounce back in poor games. The following games, it's a great look for him. But Wembanyama's averaging 18 points a game this season. His line's at 23.5 as we speak. The matchup here against Portland, somewhat difficult, right? He scores in the pick and roll and he scores in the paint. That's his predominant style, you could say. And these Portland Trailblazers, even though their defensive rating is in the bottom 13 of the league, they are very good at defending the paint. What they're bad at is everything outside of that. And unfortunately for them, Victor Wembanyama's fallen in love with the outside shot this season. Hasn't been shooting it very well, but given how poor they are at defending it, this might be the game where he pops off. So Victor Wembanyama, even though the matchup analytically could be a tough one, he's a unicorn, right? He can make changes to his play style to suit the game. Well, that's what he should be doing. So if they're going to clog that paint up, Victor Wembanyama can punish them from the outside. Now, why is everyone betting on Victor Wembanyama? It'll have something to do with his bounce back factor. And you can see it through the data this season. Sucked against Dallas, came up against Houston, pounded them. Then he had a poor game against Houston because they made adjustments in a back-to-back set. Unfortunately for him, he came up against the OKC Thunder, and they absolutely punished him. He bounced back with 25 points against the Utah Jazz. Then he had Minnesota. He sucked again with only 17, but it was a game that they did win. Comes back against the Clippers, bounces back, scores 24. Then he runs into the Houston Rockets again, and he gets held back to 15. People like betting on trends, and the trend here is if Victor Wembanyama sucks, provided that following game's not against the OKC Thunder, he's going to bounce back. And I get it, and it does make some sense, but I'm still not confident enough to take that. Another person that you could be looking at is Chris Paul. So CP3 went on this stretch of 5 games where he's killing the points props. Came up against Houston in that last game. They got blown out by 27. He only played 20 minutes, but he still scored 10 points. He's over in 5 out of his last 8, 11.8 points per game this season. Matchup for Chris Paul is not a bad one. He's scoring a lot in the pick and roll, obviously, and he's scoring above the break. And you can see the defense for Portland. They clog up the paint, but Chris Paul's not scoring much in there anyway. So that matchup is nice. Honestly, don't hate the points prop here for Chris Paul. But knowing he's out there to predominantly distribute the ball does worry me a little bit. But I definitely lean to his over in points. Looking at his assists real quick, 8.5 is the line, averaging 8.3 this season. Portland allow the sixth most assists in the league. Pardon the interruption, but I'm back. Forgot where I was at, but I can see I was talking about Chris Paul. His assist prop, shit, I got no lean on that right now. He could go over, he could not. I think the 10 points, if you're looking at a bitch ass parlay, does look appealing though. But outside of Chris Paul, who we got? Let's jump to the Portland Trailblazers. And we've got Anthony Simons. His point line's at 21.5. He's averaging 19.5 points per game. His matchup here against the Spurs isn't a bad one. Depends what you put stock in. So firstly, in terms of how he scores, a lot of pick and roll type scoring here for him. 50% of his points come out of that pick and roll. Spurs top 12 in defending that. But he also scores a ton of his points above the break. And you can see San Antonio Spurs terrible at defending that area of the floor. So his matchup is great there. The pick and roll might be a little bit difficult for him, but still a decent matchup. Now, I do lean to his over here. He has had some success against the Spurs in the past. So that's one thing that does help. This Portland team, pretty inconsistent as to who's going to score their points on every given night. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, none of them are consistent, to be honest with you. But if we break down Anthony Simons to look at the types of matchups he's had, this blue graph's representing the pick and roll matchup. He does have a difficult matchup against the Spurs. Well, it's not difficult, but it's just not an easy one. But at the same time, he's seen similar types of matchups here against the Pelicans and the LA Clippers, and he's managed to cover this points line. So that's one thing. There's no direct correlation with the pick and roll matchup for Anthony Simons. He had a great matchup against the Suns, and he only scored 20 in that game. But he's also had some awful matchups against the Kings, OKC, and Golden State where he's gone under. So maybe it does impact him. What we're calling out here, the matchup's not good or bad when it comes to pick and roll defense. But when we look at above the break threes, this is the teams who are the best at defending this area of the floor. And we probably see a better picture. The Warriors, very good at that, and he struggled. The Pelicans, not good at that, and he scored. The Kings, top 10 in that at the time. He went under. Then the Clippers, that's their only weak point defending above the break. He went over. OKC, tough matchup, went under. The Phoenix Suns, 18th in the league, so not good nor bad. He scores 20. Then he comes against the Pelicans again, who are not good at defending that area of the floor, scores another 24 points. So in terms of above the break shooting and that matchup there's direct correlation here. The easier that matchup is, the more points Anthony Simons sees. So based off all that data alone and the fact that he's cooked the Spurs in the past, I do like Anthony Simons to go over his points prop. I do definitely like that as a lean. Let's talk about Jeremy Grant. Now, he scores as a spot-up shooter. He also scores above the break three, but does he have the same type of correlation? Now, if you're betting on Jeremy Grant, look at the type of shit you got to deal with. Highs of 34 and 28, but he's had 2 games with less than 10 points this season. Oh, my God. So his points line in this is 18.5. He's hit it in 3 games this season, 3 out of 8. His matchup, spot-up shooting, the San Antonio Spurs, pretty decent, top 11, and that's how he scores 44% of his points. So that matchup's not great, but again, the above the break 3 stuff. Now, if we look at the matchup data here, one of the worst matchups for spot-up shooters, but the last time he had a similar type of matchup against Phoenix, he went over, so there's no correlation. If we look at above the break 3 stuff, he struggled against the Warriors. He killed the Pelicans because of the good matchup, but he's also had good matchups since then, and he's failed to fire. Next game against the Pels, didn't get there. He versus the Clippers, who's a good matchup, didn't get close. So it's less correlated in terms of how they defend the floor. So Jeremy Grant, he's off the table for me. I'm not keen for that. We got DeAndre Ayton versus Victor Wembanyama. 14.5 is the line. He's averaging 14.5 this season. And when I see that, I think the sportsbooks don't know what the hell to put the line at, to be honest, when the line is the exact same thing as the player's average. But let's talk about his matchup. Scores in the pick and roll and in the restricted area up against Wembanyama. The Spurs, top 6 in defending the pick and roll. And if we think about the restricted area where he scores a lot of his points, they're top 12. So the matchup here for DeAndre Ayton, not a good one. I think the most important thing to look at is probably just points in the paint. The Spurs, top 6 in terms of points in the paint allowed. This blue graph is all about the matchups where he's had, where the points in the paint matter. The Warriors don't allow too many, and he struggled. The Pelicans, easy matchup there. Didn't go well in that game, but then he bounced back over it. This is look. Basically, all this is calling out that this is a tougher matchup for DeAndre Ayton. It does not mean he goes under. Does not matter at all for him. It just means I'm not willing to play it. DeAndre Ayton, a bit of a soft big man, but he's also up against Wemby, who's a soft, very big man. So it's two soft big fellas going at it. I don't know who's going to win that battle, but for DeAndre Ayton, I'm not overly interested in betting on him, even though his rebound numbers have been looking nice up against the Spurs. Does it happen again? I'm not too sure. Out of curiosity, I want to check his head-to-head numbers against them. One game against the Spurs last season, had 12 rebounds. He had 20 points and 12 rebounds. But you also have to keep in mind last year, all the bigs were beating up on Wemby. They were saving their best for him, whereas this season hasn't necessarily happened that way. So DeAndre Ayton, I'm not overly interested in that. So, yeah, with only 3 games on, you can go a little bit light on it. But we've also got the NFL, right? So you can diversify your bets. As I said to you earlier, if you're interested in checking out Mind, check out my free Winnable. You'll get my bets delivered to your email or straight to your phone, whatever your preference is. So feel free to check that out. Won't cost you a cent. And if you did make it this far to the video, I just want to say thank you. I'm sure you've already liked it. I'm sure you've already left me a comment, and I'm sure that you've already subscribed too. Now, because there's a bit of love for the Frenchman in this video, let me know if you made it this far. Drop the comment in. Something about the French. Something about Rudy Gobert. Because I'm a little bit uncomfortable betting on him. It's probably my favorite bet of the day, though, if I'm being honest with you guys. But hey, best of luck to you. Best of luck to me, and best of luck to us. Let's go.